Hello, Study Mums, and welcome to another episode of the Study Mums Pathways to Success podcast, the podcast helping mums achieve their study goals faster, easier, and with less stress. I'm your host, Susie Phillips, and you are joining me for episode 12. Now, today's guest is a stress and lifestyle expert and speaker. She has been a naturopath for 10 years, and she is also author of Amazon's #1 bestseller, Secret Mum's Business, Creating the Lifestyle of Your Dreams. She has been featured in magazines such as Prevention and Good Health and appeared on Channel 7's The Morning Show and Channel 10's The Project. And she also has a very own podcast show, Healthy, Wealthy and Wise in Business. A very warm welcome to Angela Counsel.
Hi, Susie. How are you?
Good, thank you. I'm sure that I probably haven't been able to get everything into the introduction.
Oh, that's all right. That's fine.
You have done so much more than that. So how about we maybe start the show off today with you telling us a little bit more about those things.
Okay. Well, like most women, I'm a corporate escapee. So I started my life in the Commonwealth Bank and I worked there for 17 years. And whilst I was there, I actually studied while I was there and I actually got my accounting degree. I studied part-time. First off, I did a diploma in accounting and then I went on and did my degree. So it took about 8 years. I did it the long way. So I did that whilst I was working. And then I got to a stage within the Commonwealth Bank that basically there was nowhere else for me to go. I'd got promoted. At the time I was the youngest female in Queensland had ever got promoted to a certain status of managerial. And then I got a couple more promotions and there kind of wasn't anywhere else for me to go because all the jobs above me were full of men that weren't going anywhere till they retired. So I decided to go out on my own and become a consultant. And I actually then was a project manager and I consulted back into the Commonwealth Bank, to Westpac, to National Bank, Optus, Telstra. So a lot of the big companies. I did that for a few years and I didn't really think that my lifestyle was really affecting my health or anything because I really didn't understand this stuff until I fell pregnant. At the age of 38, I decided all of a sudden, I don't know where it came from, that I wanted to be pregnant. It took me 12 months to fall pregnant. Then when I did, at 12 weeks, I miscarried. Wow. That was a big wake up for me because I then realized that this life of traveling and being in stressful roles and all this was actually affecting my health. And I was almost at the end of a contract, so I kind of said to my husband, I'm not actually going to renew this contract. I'm going to take 3 months off just to kind of have a look around, see what else is out there. And I'd heard a little bit about naturopathy, but I didn't really know much about it. So I thought, why don't I just go check this out? So my husband, who supports most things I do, said, yeah, whatever. And I'm thinking I'm taking 6 months off, even though I only told him 3. And so I went off to naturopathy college and within 1 month I was pregnant with my son, who is now 14 and 6 inches taller than me. I spent the next 5 years studying and I was either pregnant or breastfeeding that whole time. So basically I had my children late, my first at 40, my second at 43. And that's when I was studying and I finished at college and then I went on and finished my degree after my little girl was born. And then I went into practice. And in the time since I've been in practice, I've run different types of businesses. I've had my own business, which is just a sole practitioner. I've run a multimodality clinic where I had 8 practitioners working with me. And then I went back to something smaller again. And now I don't actually practice as a naturopath anymore because I closed my last clinic 2 years ago when I wrote my book. I work online and I work with women that run their own businesses and I only work in the space of stress. On all levels, on a physical level, on an emotional level, on a spiritual level, because I believe that women these days are stressing themselves out to the point of illness and it's affecting their business, it's affecting their relationships, it's affecting everything. And the thing is, when people understand what stress truly is, I believe that they can actually make changes. So that's my role, I believe, is to go out there and educate people on what it is, how it's impacting them, and what are the simple things that they can actually do that can start to change stress in their lives, because it doesn't have to be this way. It isn't normal to be as stressed as we are.
Right. And I think, yes, we do probably just accept it as an everyday occurrence. It's just like, well, this is how we're dealing with it.
Everyone just thinks it's normal. And because I work with women that run their own businesses, the number of times I've heard someone say to me, oh, but it's just normal. If you're in business, you're going to be stressed. And go, well, what if that's just common? What if it's not normal? What if there's another way of running a business? And I truly believe there is, because I actually got to a stage of burnout. I actually burnt out. And, it took me about 2 years to realise I'd burnt out. I wasn't the best naturopath when it came to looking after myself. But I actually had to change a lot of things in my life and the way I looked at things to actually come back from burnout. Now, because I could use herbs and nutrients, which I did, and they fix some of the problem, but they don't fix the long-term problem. It really takes a shift in the way that you're looking at things and the things that you're doing to really change the way you do things. And now, look, I still have my moments. I had the other day was kind of pretty bad and I kind of cracked up at everyone. I'm not perfect, but I also have the tools that will pull me out of this stuff pretty quickly. And generally 24 hours is the most I give myself to wallow, self-pity, all that. I'm over it and let's move on. Because if you stay there one day, that's okay. If you stay there 2 days, well, if you're there 3 days, that's your choice and you've got to do something about it.
Right. And the majority of us would be there a lot longer. A lot of the time, I feel that we probably don't know, especially as mums who are juggling so much and as study mums, parenting in itself is very stressful in itself. It's a transition that we go through, and it feels stressful at different times. And then we take on study, and we
study, that's right,
things as well. And we usually don't really realize how much it is affecting us until we get to that stage where there is a physical reaction.
Right, yeah. And or we start to react with our family, because that's a big thing. And
cranky mummy syndrome.
That's right, yeah. And it's a bit the same as, when you've got young children, they'll play up at home because they feel safe. And I think that we as women will kind of blow up at home as well because we feel safe.
Yeah.
You won't do things outside of home that you would do at home because you just feel safe. But there are things that you can do that can kind of prevent that from happening in the first place. And then if you do notice it happening, actually pull yourself up and be aware. And a lot of that's about being really present to this moment as opposed to everything else that's going on.
Yeah. Okay. So let's take an example of, something I personally went through. When you first start studying with children, first of all, you have the mummy guilt about, can I, should I be taking time for myself? And then that quickly transitions into, I deserve this. I just want 5 minutes, or half an hour to.
And the resentment, yes.
And then the resentment kicks in, and then the stress starts to, the still stressful. I call it a pressure cooker. You pop it in, and every little ingredient starts to rise.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, my first thing I'd have to say, and look, I've been through exactly the same thing. One, when I studied, and two, when I started my business, is guilt is such a wasted emotion. You just get over it. And because really, most of the time your kids don't even care, because you're sitting there and you're feeling guilty. They've moved on. Yes. They may have wanted you for 10 seconds and you kind of went, I'm too busy, go away. They've moved on, because particularly young children, they're very much in the present moment. So this moment, okay, you might have snapped at them. The next moment, they're fine and they're looking at their favourite toy or whatever. And you see that with children, is that when they blow up, and then 10 seconds later, they're over it.
Yeah.
We're still sitting there stewing about it.
Yeah.
So it is about being present. And look, if you say something or you do something that you think, oh, I shouldn't have done that. Okay, you did it. You can't change it. You can, if you want at that moment, go and say, well, okay, spend, 15 minutes or so with your child because that's what they want. Or you could just accept that that's what it is and stop beating yourself up, because nothing's going to change that situation of what you just did. Nothing is going to change. If you just blew up, if you snap, whatever, you can't turn time back. So you just accept that that's what it is. Right. And you decide in this moment, what can I do now? Is there anything I can do right now? And sometimes your child has to learn that you're not available because there may be something that you must get done now, or you're on the phone or whatever. And if you can't change it, well, then just move on. Don't feel guilty. If you can change it, do something about it. So it's taking responsibility. And that's one of the biggest questions in everything that I do now is, can I do anything about this at this moment? If I can, well, then it's my responsibility to do it. If I can't, let it go. Don't stew on it.
Right.
Because the stewing on it is actually what causes the stress. And that then and because stress changes the way your body functions, and there's all these physiological things that happen as soon as you're stressed, as soon as that part of your brain turns on and you're releasing all this hormone. And if you're sitting there, feeling guilty because you weren't playing with your child and your child's off playing with Lego by now, and you're still sitting here feeling guilty and you're not getting any work done, which means you actually won't be able to get to your child because you haven't got your work done. It's like, what's the point?
Yeah, it's like replaying the same moment over and over again.
Yes,
Yeah.
and women are so good at that. They're so good at going back and replaying it. And I know that I've done it myself. And the other thing that women are good at, well, I don't know, I used to do this, I don't know if I know other people do it, is you create a scenario before you get there. So you build all this stuff up so that by the time you're in that situation, you're kind of so stewed and wound up that you just explode, and your husband walks in the door and you just go at him and he goes, my God, what just happened? Because he has no idea of all this stuff that you've been stewing in your head all day since he walked out the door in the morning and he forgot to say goodbye. And you think he doesn't love me, he's having an affair, blah, 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 blah. And he's just, he just walks in the door and it just hits him.
Yeah. So is there a delete button for all of this?
Well, there is. It's about being present. It's about realizing that you can't change the past. Whatever has happened past this moment is never going to change. And you also can't predict the future. You can only imagine the future. But any moment forward of this moment, you don't know what's going to happen. Unless someone's come up with the crystal ball, you have no idea what's going to happen. You can only think what's happened.
Right.
And you imagine what will happen. But if you just stay present in this moment, ask the question, is there anything I can do about this right now? If there is, do it. If there isn't, let it go. If your husband did walk out the door and didn't kiss you goodbye or whatever, you don't have to kind of set yourself up for divorce by the time he comes home. And that's what a lot of women do. They build this stuff up. And the other thing is, and this is actually from the work of Byron Katie, it's called loving what is. Just accepting what is.
Right.
Because what causes stress is when your expectations don't meet your reality. You have an expectation of that something should happen. I used to have an expectation that my daughter would keep her bedroom tidy.
Right.
That expectation.
You know how this is going to work out.
It never met. So I've now given up on that expectation because it only stressed me out. And then I would yell and say, clean your bedroom up. And then an argument would start. Now I go, well, look, her bedroom's a mess. She can't find anything. Nothing I can do about it. Close the door. Occasionally I kind of arc up about it, but it's like, and this is like picking your battles.
Yeah.
But if you change your expectations to meet your reality, the reality is her bedroom's untidy. Yeah. That's the reality. So if I change my expectation, the stress goes.
Yeah. The one thing that I find very interesting, and maybe you can shed some light onto it, as mums especially, we're doing a lot already. And then when we're taking on some study or work, some mums are doing mothering multiple children, we're studying, we're also working, and this could be full-time as well, everything full-time, because the amount of hours in the day. But we also tend to have this real perfectionist or idealist view of ourselves and how we're meant to handle all of those things. 100% of everything.
We look at the outside world and think it all looks perfect. We look at social media, we look at traditional media, and we compare ourselves to these perfect people. And the thing is, they're not doing it perfectly either. What you see on someone's social media feed, they only show you 5% of the good stuff.
Right.
You don't see the 95% of the bad stuff.
Yeah.
And when it comes to doing all of this stuff, we do have to start prioritizing and working out what's truly important. And one of the things that I work with my clients on is getting really clear on their values. You know, why are they taking all of this on, and where does this sit within their values? Now, obviously, if someone's got children and they're working full time and then they take on study, that study must be a high value for them. They must be getting something out of it. I mean, some people will do it because it's a martyr, and women are very good at being a martyr, and they just take more and more stuff on. But really, if you're going to study and you've got to, that's hard. That is hard work to get into study. So you've got to be getting something out of that. And so it means it's important to you. And that might mean that some of the other things that aren't quite so important kind of go by the wayside. You don't have to have a perfectly tidy house. It's like, it's in my house. You actually can't see too much of the mess behind me.
I have a zoomed in camera too for those listeners.
Because I've actually been filming videos, and there's a whole pile of lights and cameras behind me. But the rest of it, I mean, I have a cleaner that comes in once a week to do my cleaning, because I was never cleaning. But you kind of have to say, well, what am I going to give up? Because it doesn't have to be perfect. And I don't know anyone who, once they pass from this world, on their gravestone says, and she had a perfectly tidy house. Yeah. It's like, it doesn't really matter.
That's right.
Your kids don't care because they've already got messy rooms, so they don't care.
Yeah.
And you can it can be tidy, and that's something you can also get your children to do anyway. And I strongly believe in children actually helping around the house and doing their chores. So it's like you just, once again, it's like picking the bits that that are important to you, and just letting the rest of the stuff go. And don't worry what it looks like from the outside world, because the rest of the world's probably in just as much of a mess as you are.
Yeah, because the transition is not just for you, is it? It's for your family as well.
That's right.
Taking on extra work, because then everybody else, has to sort of come to the table and perhaps help out in different areas, and you may not have.
Yeah, and that's the discussion, and particularly depending on how old your children are. But, even if they're younger, children love to help out. My kids have always done Montessori school, and the Montessori philosophy is actually getting, a reason why I love it is because it has them from the age of 18 months old doing housework. Yeah. So I had my kids in Montessori really early.
My son loves mopping. I'm happy.
But they love doing that. Young kids, as they get older, mine are now actually preteens and teenagers, they don't want to do anything. But when they're young, they do want to help. And if you actually ask them to help you, they will help you. But a lot of women think, well, I've got to do it all myself because, I'm the mother, I'm the homemaker, I'm this, I'm that. And we it's a martyr thing. We take everything on, and we don't allow other people to help us. Yeah. And then we kind of get cranky when they don't.
Yes. So we've talked about all the things that we're doing to stress ourselves out. What are some of the physical, things that happen to you? What does stress do to you?
The changes in your body? Yeah. Okay. So when we've got, our brain is split up into 3 different parts, and one of them, I only talk about one, which is a primitive brain, or the lizard brain, reptilian brain. It's got a few different names. But that's the oldest part of our brain, and what it does, it senses danger. So when we were cavemen wandering the earth, it was always on alert, looking to see if there was a tiger going to eat us, whether or not we had enough food. So it was always on alert. So we're actually trained, our evolution, our body hasn't changed that much. So we're trained to be on alert for this stuff all the time. And what happens is, as soon as that part of the brain detects that there's any threat, what it thinks is threat to life, it changes the body. So it releases a hormone called adrenaline to start with. Most people understand the adrenaline rush, where the heart beats harder and you feel jittery, because that's when all the blood goes out to the arms and legs, because you're getting ready to run away. The other things that happen is your digestive system shuts down, because you don't need to digest your meal if you're not going to be dinner for the tiger. Your immune system shuts down, because it doesn't need to be fighting the latest virus. You've got to run for your life. Your reproductive system shuts down, because you don't need to be having babies as you're running away from this tiger. So all of these things change. But the adrenaline hormone is only relatively short term. It doesn't come out for very long. And then what happens is we have the cortisol. Now, cortisol is a long-term stress response. and it will release out of the adrenal glands for as long as that part of the brain thinks there's any threat, and that can be years. Right. So when we're sitting, opening our emails and we've got 100 emails, or we're fighting with our kids, or we're sitting there thinking, I'm not good enough, or we're watching TV and we're seeing all these atrocities that are going on TV, that part of the brain doesn't know that that's not real. It thinks that you're about to die. So it changes the way the body functions. So over time, we start to get changes. If you're storing fat around your tummy and you can't lose it, that's a sign of adrenal stress. Problems sleeping. So either not being able to get to sleep because your mind's spinning, waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning with the mind going like this, and even a sense of dread and heaviness in your chest, anxiety attacks, depression, digestive issues, so IBS, constipation, diarrhea, all signs of long-term stress, thyroid problems, reproductive problems, all signs of long-term stress. And if you continue to do that, and the more and more symptoms you get, then you get to burnout. And burnout is total exhaustion, and you just can't get yourself off the couch. You can't do anything. You can't be a mum, you can't study, you can't work, you just can't do anything because you cannot physically move. It's chronic fatigue, or it's fibromyalgia because you're in so much pain all over your body. So they're all signs of that, a burnout. And that's what happens when we're doing all of these things. If we're not, we need to be eating properly, because if we're not eating the right foods, our body's not getting nutrition, so it thinks it's starving. So the body needs nutrition, it doesn't need food. Most people fill up on food, but it doesn't always have nutrition in it. So the body thinks it's starving. Stress response, stores fat. All the emotional stuff that's going on, or if you've got problems with your digestive system, well, that releases toxins into the body. Stress. You're having foods that are full of chemicals or too much alcohol. That in the body is stress. It's all toxins. It's all stress. And then we put the emotional stress on top of that. And then there's a spiritual, which is our connection to self and something greater. And all of that adds up, and everything just keeps going on. And that's how we're living 21st century life.
Right. Yeah. Because even when you mentioned, having the right nutrition, and that in itself is such a confusing thing these days, what we should be eating, what's good food, what isn't good food. And,
the food that's good is the food that it actually is. It doesn't have to be.
No.
I use JERF, just eat real food.
Yeah.
If it was grown, if it walked, if it flew, if it swam, that's food. Right. That's real food. As close as possible to its original source. So very little processing, and the processing is you cooking it. Yeah. Anything that's got chemicals, additives, whatever, that is not food. Yeah. That is a food-like substance. Yeah. And that's as simple as it needs to be. Whether or not you're paleo, vegetarian, vegan, doesn't really matter.
Right.
Eat real food. Pick up a piece of fruit and eat it. That is a whole food. There is so many different. It's so easy to eat real food, particularly in the country. We live in a country here in Australia. We've got an abundance of real food. Yeah. We grow it and we send it overseas. Yes. And people are still eating packaged stuff.
Yeah, it is. It's crazy. And having a veggie patch as well. I mean, we can all do that. It's very, very simple.
That's right. It's not hard, and particularly if you're a busy mum, kids love looking after the veggie patch. We're coming into summer, growing cherry tomatoes and things like that. That is so easy, and then the kids get to know where that comes from. You get them to look after it. Yeah. They love doing stuff like that, particularly young kids. Get them to act. They look after the garden. They water the garden. They go out there and harvest it.
Right. It is. You don't have to do everything.
It's right.
And the thing is, we'll move on to talking about some stress relief. And for me personally, the veggie patch is a really great way to get fresh air, to do a little bit of meditating. With the earth and everything, and it's a really fantastic way to just get some downtime. Because I know when I take my son out into the garden, he just goes and does his own thing, and I get some time out there, and
and that's a connection back to Mother Earth, and we come from nature, but we spend so much time inside with shoes on, and we're not connecting to Mother Earth. But even if all you do is take, and this is a little tip, take your shoes off and walk in bare feet outside on the grass.
Yeah.
That just grounds you, and that actually reduces your stress levels.
It's not in bindi season.
I'm going to do it in bindis because that increases your stress levels as you jump around. But, you know, I'm lucky. I've got a beach 5 minutes from here. I can see the beach from my office here. So I go to the beach every day. Every morning after I take the kids to school, I go straight to the beach. And, you know, and that's my time out. That's my time before I do anything, I go to the beach. But, you know, you find that little ritual somewhere where you can connect with nature, even if it's at lunchtime that you go outside and you eat your lunch outside rather than inside at a desk. Go to the local park, sit on a swing. Anything that can get you out into the fresh air is going to, it actually turns off the cortisol. So it turns off this fight and flight response and puts you into what we call rest and digest, which is basically where everything's turned off and your body's allowed to recover and recuperate.
Right. So once we've taken care of, like, you know, getting that nutrition better, and you talked about, you know, obviously with stress levels and having lots to do, feeling overwhelmed, you're going to have a bit of insomnia. Like, yeah, I don't sleep very much anyway because I try and fit most of my stuff in the evening.
Let's talk about sleep and the role of sleep in stress, because we're having a little bit of a chat before this call.
Yes, yeah.
So sleep is actually, if I was to say what is the most important, behind mindset, sleep is the second most important.
Yeah. Because
your body needs to rest and it needs to recover. All of those cells need to turn over. They need to regenerate. The liver detoxes when you're asleep. All of these things happen when you're asleep. Now, in Chinese medicine, they have a biological clock, and there's different times for different systems. The adrenal glands is between 9 p.m. and 11 p.m. Right. That's when the adrenal glands recover. That's when they re-energize, when they regenerate. Now, if you're not asleep at that time, it's not going to happen. So ideally, we need to be in bed and asleep sometime between 9 and 11. I generally say 10 p.m. at the absolute latest. Yeah. Says, you know, he was having calls at 11 o'clock the other night. Because if you don't, your body hasn't had a chance to rest, and then you will wake up and you're tired before you've even started. So you've drained all your energy during the daytime, and then ideally you're supposed to sleep 8 hours to refill that energy bucket. Right. If you're not getting that 8 hours sleep, you're not refilling the energy bucket. So you might get a little bit in, but you've actually dropped. So if you can imagine that you've got a bowl of water in that just comes out during the daytime and it's supposed to fill up, but it's not going to completely fill. And then everything that you've got in there, if you're giving all that out to everybody else because you're doing everything for everybody else, this bowl of water is just getting emptier and emptier. And eventually that's going to get emptied, and that's when you're in burnout, because you've got no more energy left, because you're not recovering it at night. You're not getting anything back at night, and whatever you do get, you give away.
Right. And I guess, you know, having naps during the day while your kids are at school and things like that is not going
to... having a nap isn't a bad thing, and a lot of people want to nap around about 3 p.m., 4 p.m. in the afternoon. That's because with our cortisol, we actually have cycles of cortisol. So cortisol is our wake-up hormone. Melatonin is our sleep hormone. But what happens is cortisol actually peaks about 6 a.m. in the morning, so that's to wake us up. So it depends on the moon and the sun. So it's at the moment, it's a little bit earlier. It's about 5:15 because that's when the sun's coming up. So that's the peak of your cortisol levels. Then it actually starts to gradually come down. And round about lunch, it actually dips, and then it comes back up, and then it'll dip again at about 3, but then it goes down, and it's at its lowest at about, from 6 to 8 is when it goes all the way down. Right. And that's when we should be going to sleep, because from that time, as cortisol goes down, then melatonin, which is our sleep hormone, comes up. But there is a little bit of a dip round about that 3 to 4 o'clock. And if you haven't been sleeping properly at nighttime, you'll quite often feel quite tired. So having 15 minutes then it's only a power nap. It's not a long nap. Yeah. Just kind of get you through. But you can't, if you sleep a long time, you won't sleep at night. But
we're talking in those time frames, though, like that time is, kindy or school pickup, isn't it?
Right. And you're sitting in the car going, yes. And the other reason for that too can quite often be a blood sugar level drop because you haven't eaten properly at lunchtime. So if you have too many carbohydrates, you shoot up your blood sugar levels, then they crash. And that's when you get that drop, and then you tend to have a cup of coffee or a biscuit or something to bring your levels back up. Same thing happens in the morning. People do that for breakfast. And to actually stop that from happening, if you have more protein at lunch, it levels out those blood sugar levels. So you don't have the big spike and you don't have the big drop.
Right.
So making sure you have enough protein at lunch and healthy fats to counteract the carb load will actually take some of that out. So people who are eating lots of sandwiches, pastas and all that for lunch are always going to have that mid-afternoon slump.
And for the study mums that are listening and watching this podcast that are going, oh my God, that's so me, I'm going to be the first one to put my hand up and go, everything that you just said not to do, I pretty much do. So,
do you want me to discuss coffee?
I don't really want to because I know.
I'm actually drinking rose tea. I've got rosebuds in here, so I'm drinking rose tea.
I do have a peppermint tea at the moment.
Oh, that's okay. That's good. Good after dinner.
Won't mention the 5 coffees I've had today.
Okay, so let's just talk a little bit about coffee because it is really important, particularly if you're stressed. Coffee is an adrenal stimulant. So what coffee is like going along and giving a punch into the adrenal glands, and what it does is it releases a whole pile of hormone. Now, if you're already stressed and you put coffee in on top of that, you're overstimulating your adrenal glands. So it's just releasing more and more cortisol. You don't have, unlimited amounts of cortisol. When you get to burnout, that means you've run out of cortisol. Whilst we have a fair bit of it and our body does make it, if you're continually basically pumping a coffee into it and making it spit out a whole pile of cortisol, it's going to run out. And one of the things with coffee is that when we kind of have a cup of coffee and we raise our levels, our energy levels, and then it drops back down again. Then we have another cup of coffee and it doesn't actually raise it back to where it started from, but then it drops back lower. And then we have another one, and we basically overall, over the whole day, our energy levels are going down, even though we get these spikes every so often, but they're still going down.
Which is why we reach for another one, right? Because we feel worse and we think, oh, that last coffee didn't work. I better have another one. Yeah.
So, and the thing with coffee is it's highly addictive. Because if you try to stop drinking it, you start to get withdrawal symptoms. And that should be a really big clue to people that if you have to withdraw from coffee and it makes you sick, just like when you withdraw from drugs and things like that and it makes you sick, it's not good for you.
Yeah.
Now, but I'm not saying coffee's totally bad, because if you're okay and you're not stressed and your adrenal glands are okay, having 1 coffee a day is not going to, it's not going to kill you.
Yeah.
If you're already exhausted and you've already got all these symptoms that are going on, and then you're drinking coffee on top of that, that's going to make a difference. And the other thing we need to be aware of is coffee is one of the most highly sprayed crops in the world. So it is full of chemicals unless you're getting organic coffee.
Right.
And decaf, I don't really like decaf because I don't understand if you're going to drink coffee why you would have decaf, because really the reason why you're drinking coffee is to get it normally. But if you do it for its flavour and you have decaf, once again, most decaffeinated coffees are full of chemicals because they use the chemicals to extract the caffeine, but you can get Swiss water filtered. And if you get Swiss water filtered, it actually uses water to extract the caffeine. So it's not as harsh and there's not as many chemicals.
Because as you were saying, like everybody knows coffee's a drug, but you don't really think much about it. You think, well, there's bad drugs and there's these drugs, because we have all these prescription things and people think they're normal when they're, completely wrong.
Well, it's what that brain thinks. So it's what the primitive brain thinks. So just remember that cavemen and our ancestors didn't walk around living with 5 cups of coffee a day.
Yes.
We go back and, where do we come from? And that's always my big thing, is like whenever I look at anything and say, well, where did our ancestors come from? What did our grandparents do? What did our great grandparents do? This drinking that many coffees was not something that was done 2 or 3 generations ago. Maybe they drank tea more than they drank coffee, I think. But it's a relatively new thing, this drinking coffee. I mean, I know the Europeans drink it, but even then they don't have that much of it. It was a ritual. So
we've turned it into a very social thing, haven't we?
That's right. Yeah. And we're also just using it as an energy boost, as opposed to, going down, the Italians or whatever, they used to go to the coffee shop, but it was more about, the conversations than it was about drinking the coffee, and they would only have one a day.
And you look at their cups too, they're like these little tiny,
that's right, little things,
not a big mug of coffee.
We have triple shots in them, but but then the rest of their life also wasn't stressful. And that's the difference, because if they were just having that one cup and it was part of their social event, and everything else in their life is pretty cruisy because they're eating properly, they don't have all this other, they don't have phones popping off all the time and all this stuff. Well, that's not a big deal. It's everything else that you add on top of it. And when it comes to the stress, it's like there's no one thing. It's how it accumulates, each thing one after the other. It just keeps piling on and piling on, or it's pulling out of your energy bucket every day. Everything that you do, it's pulling out of your energy bucket. If you're not putting anything back in, you're going to burn out.
So with this stress management things that we're talking about, basically they are to try and improve everything. And then I'll be devil's advocate here and basically go, well, I'm a mum who studies. My kids don't give me 5 minutes during the day. The only time I have to study is at night. The only time I have to work is at night. Okay, this is what I'm going to be saying. I'm going to be resisting that whole, I've got to be asleep between 9 and 11.
Well, and then that's okay, because you have to prioritize that, but also know how that's affecting your health and how that's affecting your ability to be able to study. Because if you sat up at night and you continue to study, you actually won't get much done because you're too tired.
Right.
And you're trying to pull all this in. You're better off going to bed and getting up an hour before the kids get up. Right. Because you will be fresher and you'll actually take more in because your brain is open to allow this stuff in. But if you're sitting up at night and you're tireder and tireder and tireder and you're just trying to make yourself stay awake with coffee, bright lights and whatever, nothing's going into your brain anyway. Because
what if you do feel like you're more productive at night time?
You get your second wind.
Yeah. Because, for me personally, I think I've trained myself for my brain to switch on at around 8 p.m. in the and to how do I untrain that? Because I try to get up early and then I think, well, I've only got 1 or 2 hours in the morning, but if I stay up at night, I've got like 5 or 6 hours to work.
But you would get more done in that 1 or 2 hours in the morning than you would at night, because what you're doing, and it will actually take time to actually change it, because you have to train it. Because what you've done is you've actually thrown your hormones out, because your cortisol level should be low and your melatonin should be high. But what you do, and it is actually quite easy to do this these days, because we have these things called fluorescent lights. And there's a little gland right in the middle of the brain, and it actually tells daytime and nighttime. So if I walked outside now, because it's dark outside that window, that part of the brain knows that it's nighttime. So what it does is it starts sending out all of this melatonin, and it starts dropping down the cortisol. And that's why our bodies work with the sun and the moon. So as the sun starts to come down, that's when we should be getting tired. But what we do is we trick the brain and we turn a light on. And the brain now goes, I don't know if it's daytime or nighttime. You may have been outside and it sensed it was nighttime, and then you walk back into the bright lights and it goes, it's daytime. So you're actually confusing the brain and you're actually stuffing up your hormones. And long term, that can cause lots of issues, because when you finish studying and then you want to go back to sleeping properly, you've actually got these really bad sleep habits. And whenever I'm working with anyone, I believe that 99% of all sleep problems come from poor habits. And you have to change the habits. And it can take up to 21 days, 28 days to change a habit. And that is things like, and I do use herbs because I won't use sleeping tablets. Sleeping tablets don't put you to sleep. They make you unconscious. Because your hormones are still out of whack. You're actually still awake. You just don't know it.
Yeah.
But there's herbs that will actually help to balance these hormones up. And when I work with my clients, I actually use herbs to get them through. And we start for the first month or so using herbs, changing their habits. And then I wean them off the herbs and they're only doing the habits.
Yeah. So for someone like myself, if I was going to get out of that habit of staying up and getting up, and getting up early, I actually did attempt this. It was probably a couple of months ago now. And it was highly successful. I was doing a lot of coaching practice in my coaching classes, and we had to choose goals and things. And I was just like, well, I know that my health is taking a toll right now. So that was one of my goals. I wanted to switch. I wanted to get up early. And I tell you what, for that, I think I did it for 2 weeks. And I was it was more productive. I felt calmer. I could manage the house. I had meals planned. I still felt like I was on top of my work, and I even felt spaced for exercising and things like that. And I did that for 2 weeks, and then I don't know what happened.
I was going to say, why'd you stop?
I think what happened was, now that I think about it, I think I basically just started thinking, well, assessment time came. So then I had a little bit of extra workload that I had to do. And then, my Study Mum project here, I had different things that needed to be done at certain time frames. And then slowly, the nighttime started creeping, getting later and later. And here I am back now going to bed at 1 o'clock in the morning working.
Even though it makes you feel better.
Yes.
So I'm going to coach you right now.
Great.
What do you get out of that? You must be getting something out of that, because otherwise you wouldn't be doing it. Because you feel better doing it the other way. But
yeah, I feel better physically. I feel better physically, and I feel calmer physically. But I think mentally I'm still stuck in this. I've got so many hours in the evening of uninterrupted time. I think it's that I'm getting that mental kind of break from maybe my son, and I'm focused on something that I'm really passionate about and that I love doing. And I think I've turned that into some kind of warped me time.
Because if you just switch it around and said, well, and you already know that you study better if you've actually had a good night's sleep.
Yeah.
So you would actually get better results and doing what you love, and you'd probably find that your assessments became easier and all of that. I mean, this is also only a short-term thing. It's not forever.
Yeah.
But it is.
The habit could be the habit of staying up.
That's right. The habit can become forever, or it's very hard to change. So it's really just a switch or a reframe, saying, well, okay, if I go to bed early, I can do what I'm passionate about and do it really, really well first thing in the morning. And also giving yourself permission that it's actually okay for you to actually take that time in the morning and to sleep at night. Because for some reason you think it's not okay for you to sleep at night because that's time where you could be working. Well, that's actually time where you could be recovering too.
Right, yeah. And being more functional the next day.
It is, because if you got a good night's sleep, you'd probably be a better mum. You'd be able to study better, everything that you do. And you just said, you were more productive, getting more done when you were going to bed earlier.
Yeah, exactly.
Bed earlier.
Yeah. Oh, my goodness. That's such good advice.
Do you want me to give you another little bit of a hint? If you want to lose weight, you need to get a good night's sleep, because that's another hormone.
Look, I've read all of this stuff. I want to know what the psychological part of, how do I change that?
You've got to want to do it to start.
You've got to want to do it.
Well, that's the first thing. You've got to have a reason, and actually changing and say, well, okay, I want to do really well. I love what I'm doing, and I want to do the best I can. I have already experienced that when I go to bed early and do that work in the morning, that I can actually be the best I can.
Yeah.
You've already experienced that. For 2 weeks, you experienced that.
Yeah, that's right.
So why do you not want to keep doing that?
Yes, it's a very good question.
Because, there's probably a little bit of martyr in there. I've got to do this and I've got to do this and I've got to do this.
Yeah. No, you're right. And it is, because when I get up in the mornings, it's very much, I deal with everybody else. Other people's breakfast and all that kind of stuff. And I quite often then I'm like, well, I'm already behind time, and then I go and do the work that I need to do, and I haven't even had breakfast until 11 o'clock some days.
Yeah.
But some very bad habits going on there. But you explaining all of that to us today is definitely, I hope there's other study moms out there that have that same excuse of, I basically, that's the only time I have to study. And I've heard it many times as well. And, and said it to myself many, many times. But I do know, like, physically, long term, it can't be.
It's about priorities and actually putting yourself further up the priority list.
Yeah.
And recognizing that none of it works unless you're at the best version of yourself. Yeah. So putting yourself and your own health down the bottom and looking after everybody else, including all of your study, it's not, in the long term, that's actually going to be detrimental. You may get through your studies and, all of that, but you'll come out the other end. And I see this so many times because, I see this with women who work really, really hard for years and years to make their business a success. And then they get there and they're too freaking tired and run down to actually enjoy it.
Yeah.
And that's it. And sometimes maybe you need to take a little bit extra time to finish your study or whatever, but you just can't sacrifice yourself.
Yeah. Because you want to enjoy the journey, don't you, of whether it's building a business or whether you're studying, and then you're obviously going to have a job and a career. So
if you're not having fun, why are you doing it?
Yeah.
And if it gets to the stage where it's not fun, you've got to start to look at, well, what do I need to change to make it fun? And, look, I'll give you a really, really simple tip on how you can reduce stress in 2 minutes. And they've actually seen this happen. And there's 2 things you can do. Number 1, really, really simple, is breathe. Because we can all breathe. But most of us, when we're breathing, breathe up here.
Right.
And we're really tight around here and we're like this.
Yeah.
But if we actually breathe to the bottom of our lungs, and I get people to put their hands on the bottom of their ribs and breathe so that their hands come out, or so that their tummy rises, and breathe right down to the bottom of the lungs. And I get them to breathe in for 4, hold for 7, and then breathe out for 8. It's actually the slow breath.
Right.
Now, when you do that, what you do is you switch off the cortisol response. Okay. So just taking 2 or 3 slow breaths like that will actually drop down cortisol. And if you wake up in the middle of the night and you can't go back to sleep, focusing on the breath rather than everything else that's going on in your head, you actually focus on the breath and just keep focusing on the breath, you'll go back to sleep. Right. Because you'll be able to turn everything else off. The other thing, and this is related, is our posture. Now, most of us, and particularly if we're studying, whatever, we're like this, we're hunched over, or we're on a phone and we're all hunched over like this. And when we're hunched like this, this is a classic defensive pose, because we're protecting all of these organs and we've got our hard back out to whatever the danger is. So when we're in this position like this, we're telling our brain that we're actually about to be attacked. So it sets off this massive lot of stress response. And I see this all the time. I see kids walking around like this, and all it's doing, it's just firing off all these stress responses. But what you can do to stop that is to actually stand up, chest up, hand on your hips like Wonder Woman, stand it proud. And they've done research that if you actually stand here like this, just in that position, nice and tall, you stand like that for 2 minutes, you do, and you drop your cortisol level by 20%.
Wow.
But when you're like this, you increase your cortisol by 15%. So standing there like this and breathing at the same time for 2 minutes, a couple of times a day. Everyone can find 2 minutes. And even if you do it in the shower, it actually drops down some of that cortisol. So if things are getting too much for you and you're studying or whatever and you just need a break, rather than going and getting a cup of coffee, How about just stand up and do some of that breathing, and then that craving for coffee may actually go because you'll re-energize yourself.
Right.
Because you've never seen a depressed person stand up like this, nice and proud.
Yeah.
You just don't. Depressed people are down like this. Stressed people are down like this. But standing up, it just switches it all off, and you will feel better. Something really simple. Anyone can do that.
Well, thank you for explaining it like that, because, having the message about cortisol, how it works, what it's doing to your body, it does change your perception of what, otherwise people saying, well, you just take deep breaths to relax, or you just take deep breaths to do this, or breathing is good for you. It's just like, well, okay, but why? It becomes sort of like, just another fad or thing you're not sure what you should believe in. And you just kind of flick it to the wayside. But hearing it put like that really makes a lot of sense.
And it's easy. It's so easy.
Very easy, yeah.
I mean, you don't 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Any mum can do that. And as I said, do it in the shower.
Yes.
If you want, go to the toilet, close the door. I know it's hard when you're a mum. Close the door. And just stand there, and if you do it, if you're at work and you have stressful meetings or whatever, or you're going to go into a stressful situation, go to the bathroom first, stand in your power pose, do your breathing, and then you will be able to go into that situation and you will be able to think clearly instead of being all emotional, all fired up about stuff that you think might happen and it's never going to happen.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Angela. I was just looking at the time here, and I know that I'm actually past my new bedtime.
So am I.
So I really appreciate your time this evening. And I think maybe I'm going to make that a bit of a Study Mum challenge for myself on the Study Mum Facebook page. Was it 21 days that you said?
Yeah, 21 days.
And so if I go to bed and I can't sleep, what do I do?
Start with the breathing.
Just the breathing.
That's the first thing to start with.
For a little while and then go back to bed. Do I read? What?
I always say just start with the breathing and see if you can actually go back to sleep on that.
Right. Okay.
Because once you get out of bed and you turn on the lights, you've actually changed that hormone. You've actually triggered another hormone. So it's because normally you can't sleep because your mind's going too fast. So one thing I'd say is before you go to sleep is to journal. So get everything out of your head, to-do list, whatever. Get it all out of your head first. So just write it all down. Yeah. And that's actually physically writing, not typing. Yeah. Because it's a neurological pathway.
Yeah, I'm a good scribbler. I actually enjoy that. So
let all that go before you go to bed. That means you've emptied your mind.
Right.
If you do happen to wake up in the middle of the night, go into your breathing and focus on the breathing counts. Nothing else. If your mind wanders off, come back to your breathing counts.
And what were they again? It was 4,
7, 8.
4, 7, 8. Yeah, the 8 was the out one.
Breathe out, no. And because a lot of people struggle to actually get that big long breath out, and that's the main focus. Because if we don't breathe deep enough and we're not used to it, it's really hard to breathe out for 8. But if you just focus on that, and if your mind wanders, just bring it back to your count, because you're back being present. And the other thing that I do while I'm doing that, and this might sound really, really dumb, but it works. I go, I am asleep. I am asleep.
Oh, right. You're telling your brain I am asleep.
I'm telling my brain that I am asleep.
Obviously not out loud, because my husband might get a little bit annoyed with that.
No, I just mumble it to him. I just kind of, I say it in my head, go, I'm asleep.
You're like, no, you're not.
I just say it in my head, and I go back to sleep.
Well, if it works for you, I'm going to try it out. I'm going to give myself 21 days, and each day I'm going to report on the Study Mum Facebook page exactly how I'm going with that, and see how my stress levels and my coffee intake decrease.
Also try some sleepy time tea before you go to bed.
Sleepy time tea.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you can get that from the supermarket, or T2 has a nice sleep tea. But drinking that also, that can become part of a ritual. Before you go to bed, basically lower the lights. If you want to do your journaling, drink your tea, and then go to sleep. So sleep is very much about rituals, and we don't have very good sleep rituals. Oh, the other thing, no Wi-Fi devices in your bedroom, so no phones.
Yeah. We have a really bad habit of using them as an alarm clock, don't we?
Yes.
Actually, we keep forgetting, like even down at the one of those cheap shops, I keep thinking I've got to pick up one of those little
that's right.
alarm clocks.
If you have to have a phone, put it on plane mode at least.
Yeah.
Because the Wi-Fi actually disturbs your sleep.
Right.
So if you can get it off completely, that's good. And if you can actually get your sleep patterns right, you won't need an alarm clock because you'll wake up with the sun.
Or even put it in another room. And when your alarm gets off, you have to get up.
You have to get up, yes.
Yeah.
That's right.
That has worked for me in the past.
Yes.
Well, thank you, Angela. I hope you will follow my journey with that.
I will, yes.
Well, thanks so much for your time this evening.
That's been fantastic. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.